Hello all, welcome back to episode 135 of Coach Quip. I'm Coach Robyn.
I'm Coach Chris.
And today we are covering how less is more. This is true when it comes to training and racing now more than ever, right? We are literally different versions of ourselves coming out of the last 4+ years. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, we're over COVID, we're through it. I'm sorry, but it fundamentally changed so much about how we live and train and relate and experience life. And today is talking all about how we need to shift our mindset of trying to do things exactly the same way that we did before and realize that we can do things differently and usually do them in a little bit lower volumes to make them count for more. And frankly, they will count for more.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are struggling with this topic internally, but having a hard time sharing it with other people because it can be pretty emotional. Like when you actually look at how life has changed, and when we think about how we would love to be past COVID, and a lot of us would love to go back to our pre-COVID selves, the truth is work looks different, life looks different, in a lot of people's family situations look different.
Travel looks different, cities look different.
Social life looks different. Yeah, and our health is overall different. And so I know like every time I sniffle, I'm like, how sick am I? Do I need to stop everything? So having these conversations right now, I think is really important, especially, timing wise, this is perfect to think about because a lot of people are maybe have set their goals for the year or are setting goals for the fall. People are starting to really pick up their training and their training cycles. And, for some people, they're seeing that what they thought they could accomplish isn't really the path that they should be on right now.
Yeah, I think this is a really hard one where there is a period where people are almost like mourning, the version of kind of pre-COVID or however, many years ago, this was this way, right? And now we're in a different iteration. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because this is where we are right now, right? We're not able to compare to the past, which means all we can do is kind of control the here and the now and figure out how to move forward the best way possible, which again, in today's day and age as coaches, we're seeing that less is actually more.
And I love that. I love that. I mean, it kind of brings me back to one of the very first episodes we filmed when we rebooted Coach Quip, which was Easy AF.
Oh, yeah.
And, the premise of that is kind of the less is more. Like, you can get such incredible gains from dialing back. And I think that's a mindset shift that a lot of people need to make. Similarly, we are not the same as we were pre-COVID, and we are not the same athletes as we get older as well. So a couple of factors here. We have, COVID changing everything, not just us and our health, but also changing the way races are filling up or not filling up. You had mentioned that there are Ironman races that are only half full, and 5 years ago, those things were selling out
with a wait list
in minutes.
Yeah.
Some of these races in minutes or days. And we're seeing that some of these races that were so highly coveted before are not filling up at all.
And that the shorter distances are.
Right. And so why do you think that is?
First, I think people want to say, I want to do, let's just pretend the full and half Ironman example. If they say, I want to do this full Ironman because that's what I did before and that's what I want to get back to. But then it feels so daunting. Or they realize during training, like, there's no way I can do that right now with what I have going on. And then they drop down to the half. Or they just don't have a desire to. I think daily life is just taking up so much more bandwidth for everyone. That's really something that kind of bonds all of us together right now, honestly. So we don't need this crazy, 12 to 18 hour day to fill our cup because our cup is already half full, whereas before it was like maybe a quarter, right? So in those senses, the shorter stuff, again, is like checking the box. And these are trends that we see that the individual athletes don't know is already going on.
Yeah, we have had episodes in the past also about the comparison trap. This is something that I often come back to about comparing yourselves either to other people and usually like a social media version of other people. But in this case, we're kind of talking about comparing yourself to a past version of yourself. And what we're seeing in a lot of our athlete intakes or in working with new athletes is that version of themselves, that Ironman version, that past marathoner version, is preventing them, even in some cases, from getting started in making their comeback, which we just talked about in a recent episode, because they're afraid of not being able to meet the training requirements or not being able to be as fast as they once were.
Or they just can't even conceptualize how the heck do I do X, Y, and Z on top of what I'm doing right now.
Right. So you had just mentioned some of the barriers that people are facing. Our jobs look different. Travel is back, like you said. Social engagements, I think, have picked up a lot. The first summer out of COVID, we were like, oh, everybody's getting married, and it was so hard to get people into classes.
Oh my gosh, Sundays, I was like, do we just close permanently on Sundays? Like, Sunday was like, everyone was gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So people are like trying to make up for lost vacations during that COVID time. I think our jobs just fundamentally look different. So even though there's maybe some more flexibility for some people in work from home, that doesn't necessarily translate to having time or energy to do a workout after work.
Or knowing what your schedule should be. We hear this one probably the most of anything of like, my job has just changed so much, but like, do I do an AM workout? Do I do a PM workout? Do I do a noon workout? Like they have no clue how to structure a day because it is so different and so fluid.
Yeah. Many people expanded their families in the last 5 years, so we have many new parents.
I have 3 pugs now.
You have 3 pugs? You're very cute, expanded family. But yeah, even that, like a lot of people got pets during COVID, right? And like that is a different obligation and requires different timing of being home or not being home. And, the biggest one that I think that you mentioned was the lack of desire. And that's a really hard thing for people to wrap their mind around and also communicate to other people and to themselves in some cases, because a lot of our identities as athletes are wrapped up in the events that we've done or the type of training and racing we've done in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such a big chasm of like where they are versus where they were. And then it's just sadness and grief kind of in between versus realizing that there are different ways to experience the sport and still have a tremendous lift.
Sadness and grief is the best way to say that, really. And I think that also happens with people as they hit certain birthdays. We've talked about this, but I have a couple of athletes who've hit some big birthdays, and it's not because of anything physical with them. It is literally seeing that number on paper that goes,
freaks them out.
Yeah, total freak out. Like, I'm not sure that I can do any of the things that I used to do. So let's talk about the ways that less is more can help you get back to finding some passion in sport.
Yeah, and taking the frickin' pressure off, okay? Mm-hmm. So first up is making things really convenient. So a lot of our classes, almost all of our classes here at Edge, are also offered via Zoom. So just had conversations with athletes talking about I want to try to get it in, 2 to 3 times a week, but I don't know how because my schedule's all over the place. I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just try you 1 time in person and 1 or 2 times via Zoom. So you can do it from home. You're going to know what equipment you need. And then that way you get into a rhythm of doing 2 to 3 classes a week. And then eventually when you feel pretty good about that, try to tip 1 more of those to in-person so that you're still getting your workout in and you're still getting your social interaction. But it's not so much pressure to do it exactly 3 times in person like we used to do pre-COVID, right? It's a way to kind of ease in and find a happy medium.
That's great too if you were just coming back into lifting, because there's a little less scrutiny on your form, feeling scrutiny from other people, right? Our coaches will still give corrections on Zoom, and you can still have great form at home, but there doesn't have to be that concern about, are people going to judge me for using lighter weights in class or starting from this point when I used to be, here before.
Yep. Another one is going to be moving from kind of a multi-sport approach or a 2-sport approach to a single sport approach. So this goes out to all you triathletes. Of all the triathletes that I personally coach, not one of them is experiencing sport the same way that they did pre-COVID. Full stop. That is literally the majority of triathletes right now. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing? One of them is focusing on bike racing. right? And so we might pepper in. We're definitely going to have a healthy dose of strength going on, but we might have a little run and a little swim, but the majority of it is that single sport, and that's been really great because you can stack some pretty literal bricks, and it's just a simpler, less time commitment. Another one is going from Ironman all the way to like sprint, maybe Olympic distance, and that is really, really helping. And the other one, we're still getting ramped up, and we're just trying to do 4 workouts a week, and that is the goal. So what we took is this big convoluted thing that used to be 2 to 3 times a week of each sport plus strength, which is just mind-boggling, right? That this used to be able to be fit into a day, and really kind of streamlined it into something that's manageable. Because ultimately, we do want to be the best athletes possible, but we want to be able to do sport for as long as possible. Full stop. So if we take that type of long-term lens, guess what happens? We're going to figure out a new way to do it so that we can do it safely for longer.
It's so incredibly healthy too to have the cross training, and think about the people who are runners exclusively for the duration of their life, and how long do they get to do that forever? But if we shift to cycling, if we shift to swimming, if we shift to triathlon, we shift distances or to trail, that's going to give us the variety to keep us healthy as well.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned changing distance of races, and I think that's a great way to do it too. I have athletes who did the marathon last year who are really focusing on speed for 5Ks this year.
It's more fun.
It's more fun. It's such a wildly different training schedule and metrics for them. And talk about finding new ways to find success. New things to jot down in their journal as milestones. All of these new types of workouts have been so exciting for them, and it's really cool to see them after a hard marathon training cycle be really excited about something and have that goal that really lights them up.
Yeah, you're allowed to be burned out after a long cycle, 100%, and you probably get some different type of shoes.
Yes, if you are gear motivated, that's a great thing. Also, just you had mentioned changing sports as well, and I'm also encouraging some of my athletes to just pick some really oddball stuff. This coming from someone who did race walking and aqua bikes, and just picking things that are
keep it fresh.
Totally keeping it fresh, and that can alleviate some of that pressure of the past comparison, because if you've never done an aqua bike before, you're not going to have a metric to compare it to, and that's going to be a really positive thing for you on race day.
Truth. All right, next is nutrition. We hear this one a lot as well. I do think that generally people have gotten better, right? The first year, 2 years of COVID, it was a little bit of a shit show, for myself included, like for everyone. We just got really, really off our games, eating the wrong things, drinking the wrong things. People have generally gotten a little bit better cadence, although Coach Chris likes to give me shit about eating Pop-Tarts, which are available nowadays. But really what people want, they don't want to be so tied into having one piece of paper that they follow very, very stringently. It might work for a little bit of time, but generally they want little things that they change that make big differences. Like I had an athlete a few weeks ago, and their goal was to eat vegetables at every meal. And I was like, this is genius. Literally the simplest goal, because he knew that vegetables were a void. So figuring out how to sneak them in 3 times a day made a huge change to kind of his overall health and wellness.
Protein is another one. So protein at every meal. Right?
Yes.
And also thinking about hydration. There are so many different factors that you can add in there. And I think you're right. I think people want structure, but not too much structure, right? Like before COVID, when we were doing our challenges, that was a very rigid structure with great results, and it created some lasting changes for people. But to be that restrictive is really difficult.
All the time, not that realistic.
Yeah. And then similar to your training, right? So when people were training pre-COVID and were on these massive Ironman training plans or even marathon training plans that were so rigid, I think now we're in a space where there are more flexible days, there's more cross-training, and people tend to be doing better with that. Like you said, less is more, so maybe a little less on the schedule can actually help you adhere to the schedule better.
Yeah, totally agree with that. All right, less is more. Big time literal application here, reduced volume. Coach Mo of Infinity Multisport is here a lot. He's like one of our OG people at Edge. He said something to me so many years ago that really stuck with me, which was when you're training adult athletes, we have to take into account your overall stress load, which definitely is more now than it was 4 years ago, right? For 99% of the people. And the reason is because your body doesn't know, we've said this a bunch, your body doesn't know the difference between physical and kind of emotional or mental stress. So if I'm a pro athlete and that's my job, right, and I live kind of in a training bubble, I can handle, as a pro marathoner, to run 110, 120 miles a week. They're also doing them fairly quickly, right? But still, that's a pretty big volume. Mm-hmm. But if we take that same person and then put them into a non-bubble, so they're living in a city, they have a full-time job, which is not 40 hours a week, it's got to be more. They've got family obligations, maybe they have a partner, they've got 3 dogs, wait, that's just me. All of those things count toward mileage. It's a multiplier. So that marathoner, that pro marathoner living in a bubble might do 110. The non-pro that's still trying to do epic things and reach goals might do 55 miles a week. That might count as 110, right? Mm-hmm. Because all of those extra stressors actually multiply the work that they're doing. And we have to take that into consideration for all of you. Another form of this is group endurance training. When we had COVID hit, we took our training down, like 35% on volume. We took all of our volume from our intensity runs down, recovery runs, and long runs. It doesn't mean that we didn't peak out. We absolutely did. But people were losing their minds. There's no way that we could train them like we used to train them. I remember looking back at some of the plans right when COVID was kind of like opening up, and I'm like, there's just no way. Yeah. I had to completely scrap it. And of course, they're all dated, so I can always go back to it. But holy moly. To date, we are 2024 right now. We are still down probably 10 to 15% on our volumes from 2019. And that's really important for you to know because people are having better success as athletes now on that reduced volume, which just proves, again, that less is more.
Yeah, and this has been a shift that I've seen kind of the running industry take.
I agree.
That before it was like that sort of hustle culture or like the rise and grind sort of mindset. And there was a lot of comparison to who was running the most miles, who had the biggest volume in their training plans. And yes, people are winning races on far, far less volume than what you're probably reading in the news from some of these athletes who are hitting these epic numbers.
I would also like to attribute our athletes doing epic stuff to strength training.
Yeah, always, exactly. And that was definitely a benefit of COVID is that I think our athletes got jacked during COVID.
Yeah. Did you remember when we came back in person and we were like, what is happening? Everyone is tan and jacked. It was incredible. Y'all are incredible.
Yeah, I think because when I was teaching those classes from my house or from the space alone, we were doing all the workouts too, so the coaches even got jacked. It was
a wild ride.
It was a whole thing. All right, so talking more about less is more, we're going to talk about technology. So technology is awesome. We love it. It helps us track things, but also it can be a real mind bender in terms of looking back at past performances and or like holding a certain pace in your mind and thinking that you should be hitting that target when the truth is you might not be at that place anymore, and we have to honor where we're at today. So a good way around that is doing naked runs, and those are runs
not naked like that.
Your naked wrist, right? So taking that watch off or flipping it over, not paying attention to the time and data on the watch as you're running, and just shifting it more to a run for fun or a run with a certain feeling, right? So you're trying to feel easy AF. Or a run where you're just counting dogs and
or you just have your watch on and for your overall time, not your GPS going 25 minutes out, 25 minutes back.
Yeah, so there's a real benefit in that, in taking that pressure off yourself. And again, we've mentioned this a couple of times in the last couple of episodes, but nobody else is looking back at your Strava and at your training peaks. You don't have to compare yourself to those past runs either. We are where we are, and there's something, we always say, like, you need to meet people where they're at in working with new athletes or in working with in education. You have to meet people where they're at, and where you're at today is not maybe where you were at before, but it's definitely not where you're going to be in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And so you can just be where you're at and do the work that you can do that day and have that be enough, not have to compare it to
anything else.
Past PRs or other times.
On that note, one final comment of storytelling of Robyn in the loft right above where we are, right? When we're thinking about this episode, and this is, again, based a lot on the conversations that we're having with you all right now, and they've just been such kind of privileged conversations, and I'm just really grateful that people share this stuff with us. And it just keeps hitting me of how bummed people are of, kind of where they're at and how do I get back there and all of those things. And 2 days ago, I was upstairs getting something and I found our heaters. Do you remember these heaters? And it hit me. I was like, my husband built heaters with plywood. I don't even know how we got these heaters because there was nothing available. And for 6+ months in the dead of winter, we built an outdoor training studio complete with a snow wall on a loading dock that I'm sure had pigeons and other questionable things around. And during COVID, for a very, very, very long time, we met out there in mass and worked out in the dead of winter in the pursuit of just moving forward and trying to find a way through. And I kind of don't care where you're at as an athlete right now, because as a human, you've been through the last 4 years, and that is a very big deal. And I don't think that we recognize that enough. And those gains of just persevering over the last several years is so much more of a gain than any physical gain you could have gotten by doing X, Y, and Z races during that same time. And, when you're thinking about restarting, put that in your pocket, because Robyn finding these giant heaters, remembering the lengths that you all went to still be a better version of yourselves when the times were so incredibly tough, that speaks volumes about who you are, and that is the true measure of character.
Absolutely. And how do you get better if you're not where you want to be right now? Step by step, day by day. And so I think just releasing the expectations that you have of yourself based on past versions and doing what you can do today. So if that is having vegetables at every meal,
I'll do it at dinner.
Okay. You had a decent lunch.
I did.
It's okay. If it's that, or if it is being a little more grace, giving yourself a little more grace in your training schedule, and just adapting as you need to, as your life calls for it right now, that's the way that you're going to get better. That's the way that you can make a comeback, which we just did an episode on, and that's the way that you can accomplish new PRs and new personal bests as you're moving forward. Because the truth is, we're in this world right now where stress is stress, and the political stress is not going to ease up. The social stress is not going to ease up. The work stress is probably not going to ease up. And so just do what you can do to get a little bit better every day.
Yeah, I love it. Tag us in your less is more. We want to see it.
Thanks for listening to Coach Quip. Original music performed by Mend. Follow us online on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Edge Athlete Lounge. Our podcast lives in the blog section of our website. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and you can check out the show notes for additional ways to contact us. Ready, set, onward we go.